Welcome to Microsoft Virtual Academy. This is getting started with Template 10. We're going to talk about the hamburger template, Darren.
Sounds like a good plan. We've already spoken about minimal and the blank.
There's a lot of overlap between the minimal and the hamburger template, and so we're not going to recover all of that. If you are curious about some of the inner workings, certainly look at our session on minimal, but I want to talk about the differences between them, and there's only one.
There is.
Yeah, navigation is the same, structure is the same, a single file is different. And so inside the dialog, obviously, you'll pick the hamburger template, and then we'll go to the file structure that is identical except for this shell file that you'll see. And so the shell is implemented. There is no shell in the minimal. It's automatically.
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon. Right. There is a little matrix. There is no shell in minimal. Instead, the frame just sits as the raw content. Hamburger is different. There is a shell that sits as the raw content and then hosts the frame where all navigation.
So perhaps we all just take a step back and just talk a little bit about how an application is started up using the out-of-the-box blank template.
A great idea.
So there's a whole bunch of infrastructure that gets set up for you in app.xaml.cs, which is your application start. And part of the assumption that's made by this is that the root element of your application that gets stuck into the current Windows content is a frame. That facilitates navigation. What we're talking about here is introducing an extra element called the shell that will now become the root of your application. That shell will host a frame, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but that is the fundamental shift here. We're introducing an additional root element called shell from which everything else is hosted.
Yeah, and in previous sessions, we've talked about how inside app.xaml.cs, you don't need to implement anything inside the initialization. One of the reasons you might implement inside initialization is this use case, where you are interrupting the automatic generation of the frame and creating your own frame. And so the shell, to simplify it, the shell is just a page. If you're going to implement the hamburger menu inside a UWP application, then you'll use the out-of-the-box XAML control called the split view, which has no UI, which means as a developer, you'll be creating all the buttons and layout and structure. And so when you look at the hamburger menu that ships with template 10, it really is just an implemented version of the split view for you. And so it allows you to add your buttons and give in colors and things like that. That's really what it's about, is taking the existing split view that doesn't have implementation and implementing it for you. And so let's switch over to my screen for a second. I want to just kind of walk through how you might build it out. And so I'll just start with, this is File, New Project. I'll select the hamburger here, and it will lay out a project identical to the minimal project with the exception of that shell. And so let me pull up in fact, I'm going to do a quick refresh here, or build and refresh, so that I can show you the shell and what it looks like. And it's actually quite a simple implementation. So let's just look at the XAML only. And so at the root is...
So a quick one there. You just showed a little trick that not a lot of people know, which is double-clicking on the XAML will actually full pane the XAML.
You're right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I just did a quick rebuild and refresh so I don't have these underlines, because that's going to bother me.
It's irksome.
Yes, exactly. All right, so that will take a moment, but they'll all go away here in just a second. But what I want you to see is, like we said just a second ago, it is just a page, and its root control then is the hamburger menu. And so inside the hamburger menu is where we define the buttons and where we define both the top buttons, which we call primary buttons, and the bottom buttons, which we call secondary buttons. Now, we'll have a session dedicated to this control so you can get all of its details. We just want to show you the template and how it's implemented here. And I'm still not getting that darn refresh. It's killing me. But, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
But I'm still getting a thing. You know what? It doesn't matter. All right, so it's gone now. Now, if I reopen it, it'll be fine. Yeah. It probably is true, actually. Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah. Hilarious.
So you will be adding buttons to it. And remember that this is predefining what the buttons will look like for you. And it's worth at least saying that these buttons and this layout is meant to mimic the implementation of the News app that ships with Windows 10. And so if you're wondering why it looks the way it does, open up the News app, and that's what the one that we're basically copying. So we took the internal design guidance from that and implemented it here. The other thing that's different inside this is the implementation of the shell. And so right here we were talking about on initialize async, which could have been deleted from the minimal project because it was just there to show you.
But this is an affordance that we've introduced in Bootstrapper that allows you to inject additional initialization logic at the right time.
That's right. On initialize async especially occurs before the frame is added to the content of the window. And so inside XAML, window.current.content represents the main window. The current, meaning the one that the thread you're on, and at load time there's only one. And then the content of whatever XAML tree you have. And so in this case, we're hoping that it's empty. And if it is empty, we're going to generate using the navigation service factory method of the Bootstrapper to create the navigation service that will load into the shell. And it seems like there's a lot of extra steps here, but this is the way it has to be in order to make everything work together in a nice way. And so we also are wrapping it inside a modal dialog. And so both the hamburger and the modal dialog, we all have a session dedicated to. But this is just the quick implementation of it. So we'll have a navigation service, and here we'll add to its content the shell, and then to the modal content of that, we'll have the busy so that we can overlay something on top of that. But this is the code that is double checking to make sure that every time your application launches or is activated, that it has the modal dialog we expect, and that the modal dialog holds inside it the shell. The shell then holds inside it the split view. And that is the implementation of the hamburger menu that has inside it the frame that does all of the navigation.
Exactly. And the reason it's important to separate these things out is you don't want to have to put your navigation menu on every single page. So you have your navigation menu outside of the frame hosting the frame.
That's right. I'll go ahead and run it so that we can kind of see what it looks like. And hopefully it will look just like the minimal project. And so you'll see that you have the same setup and the same, we're having the resizer here, and I can still put whatever parameter I want to pass. It still keeps track of the visual state because the main page on both of these projects is the same. But it has different behavior for that menu on the right or on the left. And so what I have here is the hamburger button itself and then the menu below it. And so as we change the size of the window, so I'll just go to narrow real quick, the button remains, but the menu is hidden. And then as we go to normal, the button is still there again, but the menu is revealed. We call this the compact view, and that's a display mode of the split view. That's fundamentally what we're implementing.
Compact and inline.
Compact and inline. And then as we make it very, very wide, it goes to inline. Can I get it wide enough?
Yeah, I'm just going to move that.
There we go. So you can see the button goes away, and so now we only see the menu. And then, so you might think, well, you know, I'd really like for this menu to be a different color. You can do that. I'd really like for the button to not go away when I do that. You can do that as well. And then all of these pieces are implemented for you through, let me go back into our styles file, our custom styles. And so it's a little bit different than the minimal, only in that we also include a style for the hamburger menu. So how do those different breakpoints lay out? They lay out because we set them as properties on the hamburger menu. That's the full template of hamburger menu. It really is the minimal template with the hamburger menu on top of it. And you could certainly take a minimal template, change your mind later, and add a hamburger, and just copy those small sections, or just start with a hamburger menu.
Sounds good. You know, and obviously it just ties in, as you mentioned, with the whole navigation service. So if you had multiple pages in there, you would see them being selected as you navigate, and it also changes as they move through the back stack.
That's right. And so what you would expect for secondary commands are still there, but we allow you to navigate here as well. So you can navigate between them. And even as you do the navigation, it maintains your positions.
And you can see home is selected again as you navigate it back. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
All ties in.
Okay, so that is the hamburger menu template. Easy enough to use. It might fit the paradigm of your app. It might not. Don't feel like you have to do it. In fact, don't feel like you can't customize this to look the way you need to as well. Meanwhile, here it is for you to come try out. Good luck.